Okay, students of global business communication, it is Saturday night, and in Canada it's hockey night in Canada. So this is why I'm wearing my Edmonton Oilers jersey. This is the team I've supported since I was a baby. You'll probably never see this orange and blue thing again, but this is why I'm wearing it today. Obviously, the sports have all been canceled, so among other things, it's something that many people are missing. I'm one of those people. So I play hockey myself and I watch it in my free time. So that's why I'm wearing this jersey for today. Today's topic is, I think, is a difficult one. This was not on the syllabus because when I wrote the syllabus, I had no idea that the coronavirus was going to be this bad. And I'm guilty as much as anybody else. There was lots of predictions about what would happen. Very few people expected it to be this bad. And there are still people making predictions and downplaying it or overreacting. And there is something we call a middle ground. And this is what we're looking for today. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to think carefully, how to examine information in general, and how to specifically look for signals that something is wrong. Basically, the topic for our class today is misinformation and disinformation. I shared an article with you about some rumors that were circulated in the media, which is how the media works. We're going to talk about lots of different ways of communicating in this class, and I think all the things that I tell you are going to sort of come together to help you be a more discerning person. And what I mean by discerning is for you to look at things, look at information, and digest it and analyze it, and not to be passive about it. That's one of the things I talked about already in this class, is whether you engage information actively or passively. In my professors, when I was studying English in my undergrad, upper year especially, and doing my master's degree, they were constantly trying to get us to look at things more carefully, not to just receive information and just absorb information and just do things without thinking. Basically, human beings have filters. We have to have filters because you can't, or at least most people don't look at everything critically, don't look at everything carefully, because in some sense it's just exhausting. If you're just going to, every time somebody says something, every time you see something, that you question it and you check it and you are skeptical. Skeptical means you don't believe it. And you spend a lot of energy and time examining everything, then it's exhausting. It's stressful. It's exhausting for a lot of people. Some people have personalities, and some people enjoy that. There's a certain type of person who just wants to do that. You might find that type of person annoying. You have to, if you can go too far in that sense. You have the super passive, just go along with everything type person. And then you have the person who is meticulous and careful and somewhat neurotic about everything that they do. And neurotic means obsessively caring about details and arrangements, and it's not a common word in psychology anymore, but basically it means a person that you would probably think was difficult to deal with because they want things to be a certain way, and if they're not a certain way, they can't handle it. That's what a neurotic person is. If you've ever seen Big Bang Theory, Another Freudian term is anal retentive. That fits pretty well with being neurotic. Um, I won't get into that in detail. If you want to know what I'm talking about, send me an email and I'll explain in more detail. But a person who's neurotic has to have certain things exactly the way they want it. And Sheldon, the character, I'm not sure what the actor's name is, but Sheldon, the genius, I think he's a theoretical physicist at Caltech in the TV show Big Bang. He's a neurotic person, and he actually can't handle it when somebody sits in his spot in the sofa. Everybody has to be in their proper location, and everything has to be cleaned and arranged in a certain way. Otherwise, it disturbs him. And when it disturbs him, he reacts, and it bothers everybody else. He's a difficult person to be around. But that's what makes the show funny, because he's so difficult. Okay, so you don't want to go too far. But what I'm saying is, if you are complacent and you don't consider carefully what information you're acting on, and when you're making decisions without being careful about where your information came from, you end up making bad decisions. And this happens all the time. The coronavirus has now spread all over the world, and 500,000 people have been infected. So we have a lot of information now that we didn't have before. So before, we just were making guesses, predictions, doing our best to figure out what would happen, what the probabilities were, and most people were wrong about how serious it was. And there are people, I know people who are still downplaying it and saying people are overreacting. They may be right. Some people are overreacting. I'm not going to argue with that. But some people are also underreacting. They're not responding it. They're not taking it seriously. And you have to have some balance between those two reactions. So one of the dangers we're going to focus on today anyway, one of the dangers is getting the wrong information, which is misinformation. And one of the sources of misinformation is simply that people don't realize that the information that they get is not accurate, and they don't check it, and they just share it. And this is the result of something we call going viral. And I think the word virus is going to be less and less popular in the next few years. Usually words that become associated with death and destruction and pain and suffering tend to increase in a negative context and decrease in a positive context. So we've been saying for a long time, probably almost 20 years, we've been describing things that become super popular on the internet and catch on, like Gangnam Style, if you're a Korean person, and if you're not a Korean person, you still know because it went everywhere, or BTS. Those are two examples of Korean entertainers that their videos and their music went viral. When was Gangnam Style? 2011? It's a long... Some of you might have just been in elementary school or middle school, maybe. But I remember very well, whatever year that was, 2013, I think. Don't quote me on that. 2013, Gangnam Style broke the records on YouTube, which I'm using as a platform now, probably partially as a result of those pioneers that made YouTube such a powerful platform. And then Google bought it out, and then it got even bigger after Google purchased it. So the 4 or 5 billion people watched. I think Gangnam Style was the first video to reach 1 billion views, if I'm not mistaken. I didn't look this stuff up, but I'm pretty sure. So that that level of fame, that level of global reach, people started calling it viral. And the reason they call it viral is because of what the coronavirus is doing. A virus can pass from one person to another, and using transportation networks infect everybody in every country around the world. But I don't think that people are going to be super enthusiastic about saying, oh, check out this viral video today. Also, thousands and thousands of people have died because of a real virus infecting people. So it's probably not the best description. That's what misinformation is, though. Misinformation is like a virus. It's like a mental virus. And it can spread around. And if people follow that, if people treat it like it's accurate and respond to it and make decisions based on it, the consequences can be terrible. Just last week, there, a few weeks ago, a French lab discovered that some malarial medicine, some old medicine from the 1950s, if I'm going to pronounce this properly, chloroquine. I don't think I know how to pronounce it properly, but that's what it is. This drug that's been used to treat malaria, it's sort of out of date, but a combination of this drug and some other drugs seem to be effective in treating patients and reducing the length of time that they were sick from the coronavirus. They did it with a very small group of people in France. Donald Trump picked up on this. I don't know how. Maybe somebody in his government. I'm not going to blame Donald Trump. Don't get me wrong. He deserves a lot of blame, but he's just a figurehead, right? The administration is to blame mostly, as much as he is. I think Donald Trump makes decisions that are wrong, just like any president, but it's quite possible that people are whispering in his ear and telling him things. And if an American government officer tells him something that sounds attractive, I think Donald Trump is pretty desperate for good news, just like anybody else in America, because now they have the worst situation, even worse than China. So Donald Trump and everyone else in the United States really wants something to say something positive. And so Donald Trump got that advice or heard that information and then immediately said that they were going to roll it out. And the scientists and experts said you just can't do that until it's tested properly. But he said a bunch of things anyway. And some people listened to what he said. And somebody in the United States took that drug and took too much of it, and they died. That's an example of a really horrible outcome of acting on information that is false. That I do not think that Donald Trump wanted anybody to die. I think he was motivated by politics, and that he's, as many other world leaders are, he's trying to find solutions. I'm not a supporter of Donald Trump. I'm just trying to give perspective. Moon Jae-in, we'll just switch gears for a second. In Korea, Moon Jae-in initially downplayed the seriousness of the coronavirus and allowed more people from China to enter the country than he probably should have. And some students, many of my students are Chinese. Most of my students are Korean, obviously, but I have, as you all know, I have students from Bangladesh, Kazakhstan, from Europe. I have my first German student this semester, which I'm always excited to have a student from a country that I've never taught a person from a particular country. I've had students from 50 different countries around the world, so I'm not discriminating at all. But what everyone is doing right now is basically limiting international travel, and it's safer for a Chinese person. It would have been safer for a Chinese person to stay where they were than to pass through, a busy international airport like Incheon and be exposed to other Chinese people and perhaps Korean people who were exposed to people in China and so on. Like nobody knows. One of the biggest problems is that with this virus, and there was lots of reports that were false about various things, but now we know you can be contagious and not be sick. So you can walk around for 3 or 4 days thinking that you're still fine and spread the virus to other people without even realizing it. So you have to behave. Essentially, you have to behave like you're infected. Like, I know I'm not infected because I haven't been around anybody or touched anybody without immediately sanitizing my whole exposed area of my body, my head and my hands and my feet. Every time I go out and I come home, I throw my clothes in the laundry and I take a shower. I'm very certain that I'm not infected. However, I just every day behave like I could be infected. And so I limit the amount of contact I have with everyone else. That's essentially what everybody has to do. And then this thing will go away. But some people don't want to do that. So there's all kinds of rumors of things. And let's go beyond just the coronavirus, because I'm not just talking about the virus here. I'm talking about anything. Misinformation gets spread very, very quickly, like a contagious virus. It can instantly be picked up from one source and spread around the world and come back again. And just like a virus, and that's why the word viral is so appropriate, misinformation can circulate and then disappear, and then a few years later come back. So I'll give you this. This is a great example, and so we have to constantly be on guard for these kind of situations, this kind of information that's out there. This is going back 6 or 7 years now, and I believe it was initially a story that was published in the South China Post, I think it's called. It's an English newspaper in China, and they picked up this story, which turns out not to be true. But anyway, they picked up this story, which you may have heard of. I hope you have, because now I can tell you it's not true. But there was this story. There was this Chinese guy and a Chinese girl, woman, man. They got married. The woman was beautiful. The man was handsome and rich. They got married, and then they had a kid. And the baby was born. And as the baby started to mature, the father couldn't believe how ugly the baby was. Now, this is not a very nice story, and I'm sorry to repeat it, but it caught on so fast that it just literally made its way around the planet, from Korea to Japan to, I heard it on Facebook. I have friends all over the world. Everybody shared it on Facebook. It was all over the place. It was on the newspapers, picked it up and everything. Apparently, it originally came from China, an English newspaper. The guy saw the child, and he couldn't believe how ugly the child was, because he's a tall, handsome, good-looking guy, and his wife was really pretty. So he had, he investigated his wife, and he found out that she had done a lot of plastic surgery and cosmetic work to her body, and that he found pictures of her from back before all that expensive surgery was done. So she turned out to be an unattractive person, and the story claimed that she had spent 100,000 American dollars, in Korean won, or 100,000 American dollars on her cosmetic improvements. that story for some reason got really popular, went all the way around the world, and then it went away. And then like 3 years later, it popped up again, and everybody started sharing it again. And it had been debunked by that point. And I said to some of my friends who shared it, I was like, that story is just a fairy tale. Somebody made that up because it sounded like a soap opera situation or something. Because the guy in the story, he divorced his wife in the story. He filed for divorce because she had lied to him, and his lawyer accused her of lying, and that the marriage was invalid because she had not told him the truth about what she originally looked like. It's a ridiculous story, and it's not true. That is not disinformation, though, because it didn't have a plan, and it wasn't laid out and it intentionally circulated. It was more like a rumor or like an attractive story that somebody picked up on, and if the reporter just completely made it up, that's one thing, but it sounds almost like somebody told the story and the reporter just said, oh, this is too good. This story is too interesting. I don't care if it's true or not. I'm just going to write about it anyway. And there was no names, no faces or real evidence to back it up. So if it really did happen, it was just one person said it happened and another person said it happened, and then they told the story to the reporter and they wrote it down, because we don't have any evidence that there was actually two people who went through this experience, right? So that's misinformation. If something is categorized as disinformation, that means that somebody's actually intentionally telling you a lie. They have a purpose behind it. They could be trying to confuse you or manipulate you. They could be trying to hide something that they don't want people to know. They could be covering up something or denying something that somebody said they did something, and they're making up something and giving information that's not true to deny something that somebody else claims is true. This is what disinformation is. It happens all the time in politics. In some ways, I would say it's more dangerous than misinformation, because there is some sort of plan or agenda that somebody wants to make you do something, and so they use false information for what they want to do. Misinformation is almost like accidental, or I can't say it's innocent, but it's just, carelessness or mistakes or accidents where people are spreading around things. It's kind of like the article I shared with you. It's like the air quality has improved. Obviously, if we don't consume as many goods and products, and we don't run our factories 24/7, and people stay home and don't use transportation, and there's less airplanes, obviously there's less pollution. So it's just simple math. How much can the earth handle? I don't know, but less is better. So less pollution is that's a fact. Our environment is improving because we're not pushing the limits of the earth as much. That's a fact. That's not misinformation. What the story that I had you read about was telling you was that there were dolphins jumping around in Venice in the canals, which is not true. There were dolphins jumping around in an island, which they jump around all the time. The water in the canals is probably clearer because there's less boats, like I said. And it's connected to the truth, and maybe the people who wrote these articles and spread them around initially were just trying to emphasize something, and heard some stories and they repeated them without checking, and they didn't mean anything by it. But it's not innocent when your responsibility as a reporter is to check. So if there's Chinese elephants getting drunk off corn wine or whatever the story was saying, then either it's true and it happens, it's happened because of the coronavirus situation, or it's just a random thing that has nothing to do with the coronavirus, and you're just making up connections and making up facts, which is misinformation. So, as a reporter, the difference between misinformation and disinformation is slight. But if you're an international spy, or you're working in the CIA or the Russian intelligence operatives, or you're a Chinese hacker, it doesn't matter. An American hacker, you're working for an intelligence service, private or public, government or not, Western or Asian or African. If your intention is to make people think the wrong thing in order to help the president or your military or something like that, it's propaganda in a lot of cases, and it's disinformation in the sense that you're intentionally making people think the wrong thing so that you can control what they do. So generally, disinformation is less ethical also, but the outcome can be similar. Who is guilty of this? Like I said, reporters that are careless. Anybody who's careless is going to be guilty of both these things. More misinformation than disinformation. That's also a difference. It's like, in some ways, it's kind of like if you accidentally killed somebody, you wouldn't get the same punishment as if you intentionally killed somebody. We distinguish between those things very carefully. Premeditated murder is a lot worse than what we call manslaughter, which is you did kill somebody, but that wasn't. It was more irresponsibility than I want to kill this person and I'm going to do it, and so you set it up. That's a very morbid example. I apologize, but it does drive the point home. Media of all kinds, newspapers, journals, blogs, tabloids, message boards, books, websites, speeches, presentations, broadcasts. They can all provide you with the wrong information. So I'm doing my best today in every class to be a responsible professor and not to misinform you about anything. And one of the things that I can do is that I can carefully go through my information. I can research and check multiple sources and follow up on everything that I teach you. And then if I make a mistake, as I did in a couple other videos, when I find out that I made a mistake, I admit the mistake and I correct the information and deliver it to you as fast as possible. That is how Moon Jae-in corrected his mistake. He said, it's fine, everybody do what you're doing normal. We'll just watch out for a few Chinese people that might be sick as they return at the beginning of the semester. Everybody just calm down, it won't be a big deal. And then 2 weeks later, he completely changed his tune, partly because there was patient 31 in Daegu who was a super irresponsible person who ran around when she was sick for a week, infecting as many people in Daegu as possible. And that behavior signaled to the government that they had to change their policy. So lucky for us, we had an outbreak, a sudden increase that shocked a lot of people and caused Daegu to lock down and fix the problem quickly. They have not done that. They did not do that in Italy. Now they have, but I'm not going to say it's too late, but there's been some really horrible suffering because it was done too slowly. But Moon Jae-in did respond. I'm not saying Moon Jae-in's good at anything else. I'm not saying he's a good president or a bad president, or I like him or I don't like him. That's not my business, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. However, the fact is, he initially said it wasn't a big deal. He quickly did a 180 when the virus started spreading quickly, and the country responded. And now we have 9,000 cases total. The United States had 25,000 new cases in one day yesterday. New York City had 7,000, over 7,000. 7,500 cases in one day, in one city. That's all the cases that we've had almost total in the last 2 months in one day, in one city. So be thankful that misinformation here has been limited, and that the government has a controlled response which is fairly balanced. They haven't thrown people in jail or locked down people's behavior completely, and I'm thankful for that. I don't want to be locked in my house and not be allowed to go outside, but they have really insisted on tracking people carefully, and this has made our lives safer. We do want to have balance. People need to be able to go outside, but people need to be careful when they do that. That's the balance. What are the disadvantages for a person? The advantages for causing misinformation are clear, like I said. Confusion, hiding information from people, covering things up, denying things that you don't want people to believe or you think are hurtful to your reputation or your brand or your company or your campaign or whatever you're doing. You can cheat people and manipulate people pretty easily if you use false information. When it comes to the public, sphere and the private sphere, there are advantages and disadvantages on both sides. We'll probably talk about this a little bit more next class, but when it comes to public institutions, you generally get more consistency and have a higher cost overall, but a more limited range of information quality, and if it's a service, the service quality is in a narrow band. So in a private situation, you get really bad stuff and really good stuff, and the bad stuff just gets eliminated. Whereas the public range, it's like public education or anything else. It's not, or healthcare or anything else. America has the best healthcare and also some of the worst, because they have really highly trained, expensive doctors who have great equipment, but they also have people that don't have access at all. So you get this huge range. Whereas if you have a universal healthcare system, public healthcare system, or public education, you get a narrower range where you have, some lower quality or higher quality, but it's generally all averaged out in the middle. Same thing goes for education. In the United States, you have schools, institutions that are the best in the world, and then you have colleges and public schools, private schools, public schools. You have these educational facilities that are very, very they're underfunded, and they're not run well, and they're not managed properly, and you have just this huge variety. I said a month ago, and I can pull up quotes and screenshots of things that I said. I always said all along that one of the reasons that the United States was going to be hit the hardest is because there's such a variety, there's such a large range of everything. It doesn't matter what you're talking about. This is the essence of American culture, is that people are allowed to do what they want. Everybody has different opinions about everything. There's people from all over the world. It's such a multicultural, it's such a diverse country in so many ways. Geographically, genetically, physically, environmentally, culturally, religiously. Everything about America is so diverse. It's difficult to rally everybody around one idea and to get them to behave in the same way. More difficult than probably anywhere else in the world. Not because of their political institutions, because of their culture and everything else. So there's a huge downside to this misinformation, and we can see it happening. There's going to be, as a result of not being consistent about what information is out there, in the short term, the misinformation didn't cause a problem, but in the long term, it became a big problem. People start to not believe what you say. When they see that misinformation is coming out constantly, they stop believing you. So that's a big problem. Your reputation gets damaged. People become unprepared because they don't know what's going on. It affects public opinion. It affects consumers and clients and constituents. And once people learn about other versions, then they tend to pull back and figure that maybe I should just do what I think is best and not believe the government, or not believe the company, or not believe you are all upper year students. If you're managing a company and that's what you do, you provide this erratic, inconsistent information that's never, correct or verifiable, then you're going to end up losing all the support for your products, for your service, or whatever it is that you're doing. Human resources. You're going to become unreliable, and people are going to gravitate away from you. You're going to repel potential people that you could, provide things to, and maintain. You'll lose the relationships that you need to run your institution, business, organization. Okay, so this is the essential message of today's lecture, is through all these examples and through the descriptions that I said, you can see how dangerous misinformation can be, and how essential it is, to do your best to verify, to check, to be discerning, to be careful, to research, and to understand where your information comes from before it's delivered. And if you deliver it and you find out that it's not what you thought it was, there are corrections to be made, or it's not true. Essentially, it's not related to facts or evidence or any of that verifiable information, then you need to let people know. You need to communicate again, and this is something that people feel like once they do admit that something is wrong, that it's going to make everybody it's going to diminish their reputation, and people are going to lose faith in them, and so on. And that might be true, but again, I have to emphasize, in the long term, this is just something that if you deal with something quickly and effectively, that really can minimize the damage in the long term, right? Whatever company you're talking about, there's example after example, and I will provide some more examples next week as we move into electronic communication, because these days that's part of what electronic communication can do. You have the ability to very quickly follow up. If you make a mistake, a product was sent to the wrong place, or you need to respond to somebody, like, we have this ability to very quickly communicate across the entire planet. So we can respond to problems very quickly if you're prepared to do that, and if you believe that's important, which I believe it is. So like I said, last week I made some mistakes in my British and American culture opening first lecture, and I fudged some dates, and I realized my mistake as soon as I'd finished recording, but I didn't want to record for another hour just because I had missed a couple dates, so 3 dates. So I quickly wrote in the comment section below the video what the correct dates were, and the next week, which was this week, when I did my lecture, I told my students the correct dates, even though they don't care. I just thought it was better for me to fix my mistakes and own up to the truth as soon as possible, so that people believe that when Professor Sullivan says something, that he's doing his best to always say something that is accurate. And that, I think that's a better way to maintain the confidence of your students. Like I said, I have students, you may have clients, customers, or you have coworkers. That's the way to do it. So misinformation is something that's rampant. It's all over the place. Don't become part of the misinformation network. Break yourself out of it. Don't spread information that's false. And when you share information or you decide to give information to people, be careful. It's very easy to click. It's not, you can't unclick. I don't know if this is, probably somebody said this already. It sounds like something I heard from a TV show a long time ago. One character in a TV show I watched said, "You can't unfry things. Once you fry something, you can't unfry it." Does that make sense? It's true. You can't be something that you're not. So, you can't unclick things, students. Once you click, there's a record of it. It's sent. Once you click send on your email and you send it to me, I get to see it. And there, you can't erase it. It's in my inbox and I have a copy of it. So be careful before you make a decision and before you spread something. That's very good advice for the rest of your life. So for next week, I would like you to read the commencement speech that Steve Jobs does. Next week, we're going to talk about communication. I think week 4 was originally supposed to be electronic communication, but I decided to talk to you about speeches next week instead. So to set that up, I have a really short clip of Steve Jobs commenting on Microsoft because he makes some really interesting comments. The guy always is a bit of he's kind of an enigma. He's kind of a mysterious person sometimes, but since he's such a iconic person in American business and Koreans are obsessed with him. Everybody I can't say all Koreans are, but every Korean student I've ever taught knows who he is, and many of them admire him. I've chosen to analyze his commencement speech at Stanford in 2005 because that's the famous speech where at the end of the speech he says, "Stay hungry, stay foolish." So we're going to talk about it. Part of the reason that I've changed the syllabus so much is because there were supposed to be group presentations in this class in May, but I have a bad feeling that that's not going to work out. So we're going to have to alter what we're doing. You're probably going to have to do individual presentations and stay away from each other at the very least. We're not supposed to be, probably not going to be able to touch each other for a long time. So even if we're in the classroom, we're going to have to keep the space between each other. So I'm just going to have you do them individually. Also because this is a quite small class, almost like a grad student seminar, which is awesome. So there's only 10 of you guys, less than 10 of you guys, so, and girls. The 10 of you, or maybe, I'm not sure how many there is now, but about 10 of you are going to be in the classroom with me, and you can do your presentation individually. I was expecting there to be something like 30 students, but there's only 8 or 10. So you can do your presentations individually if we're in class, or if not, I'm going to make you record your presentation like I do with my webcam. So you should be watching me and picking up some cues. Don't do the bad things that I do and do the good things that I do, because later on in the semester, you will have to do a presentation either in class in front of me, or you'll have to record yourself and send it to me. And then I will evaluate your video. It should be fun. Honestly, I hated this when I first started. It made me nervous. It's still hard work, and but presentation is all about practice. So I hate to break it to you, but You're going to be nervous whether in front of your webcam or you're in front of me and your classmates. There's going to be mistakes and it's going to be tough to build your confidence. But if you do it over and over again for hundreds of hours, as I have, you'll become more comfortable and relaxed, and you'll become more effective. So read Steve Jobs' commencement speech. It's a very famous speech. It's one of my favorites. I have a lot of favorite speeches, so I'll share some others next week too. This is your week 3 makeup lecture. So since you already have an assignment due on Monday, and it's your assignment is more difficult than some of the other classes, I would like you to respond. It should be about 1 page long. Okay, it's upper year class, so that's the minimum length, I think. 1 page minimum, 2 page maximum. Please email it to me. So you have to read about Andrew Sullivan as well. His article was attached to the last lecture, and it just gives you some advice on how to, what perspective you should have on the coronavirus. It's a very well written article. He's a great writer. And then check out Steve Jobs. There's a 1-minute video about him commenting on Microsoft and making some criticisms. And there's the transcript of the commencement speech. So your class is on Monday, which is the 30th. You have 1 assignment due then, and I would like you to complete this assignment about analyzing Steve Jobs' commencement speech. That should be completed for next week, and I will provide you with more instructions on exactly what to do on the website and through my next video lecture. Okay? So thank you for listening. Make sure you log in and watch this video and get credit for your makeup class for last week. The deadline is Sunday night as usual. And then tomorrow night, Sunday, I will be recording week 4 lecture for you, and in which I will include more instructions about what to do with the Steve Jobs stuff. And there'll be more speeches that I refer to in that lecture too, as I explain to you how to do a good presentation and how to make a good speech. That's all I have for you today, so that's it. Signing off. I hope Hockey Night in Canada comes back soon, because I miss it. Have a good weekend. Talk to you on Monday.